Hello, and thanks for joining us. I'm Shannon Sand, an agricultural economist and extension educator with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Center for Ag Profitability, and one of the hosts of Ag Smart Money Week. CAP hosts regular webinars most Thursdays at noon Central Time. You can find the schedule of upcoming webinars as well as the archive of every recording on our center's website, cap.unl.edu. Today, we are going to be focusing on calculating annual cow costs. Understanding the different economic costs associated with cow-calf production provides producers with information that you can utilize to make management decisions which help to improve profitability. To present, we are very excited to be joined by Berger, a beef systems extension educator located in Kimball. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate the opportunity to come on tonight. Well, this will be a lot more fun tonight for all of us if you're willing to be interactive with me. So as we go through this, I'm going to ask you to come on chat and just type in some thoughts as we go along. We're going to talk about annual cow costs tonight, and we're going to take a look at this from an economic perspective. And what I mean by that is we're going to say no free land, no free labor, no free money. So what I mean by that is if I own a ranch, and that ranch is growing grass, that grass has value. And so for tonight's purposes, I'm going to ask that those cows pay fair market value to the grass that's owned by the ranch. Because if I own a ranch, I don't have to own cows. And if I own cows, I don't have to own a ranch. That grass that's grown on the ranch has value. From a labor perspective, I'm going to say that even if you're owner-operator labor, we're going to say let's value your labor at what it would cost to hire someone to replace you. To hire someone to do the work that you do, what would it cost to pay someone to do that? So I want us to be fair with what the value of your labor is. And then also as we think about money, if you own cows, those cows have a value. You should recognize that the investment in those cows has value. As we think about the value of money today, if I was going to go borrow money on an operating note today, probably looking at around somewhere around 10%. A significant increase from where we were 2 years ago. I don't think anybody in here would be willing to make me an interest-free loan for the next year. If you are, give me a call. I'd like to take you up on that opportunity. In my saying that, then we have an investment that we have in the cow herd and equipment. We should expect some return on that. Now, I'm going to let you decide what that is, but right now at our local bank here, we can get a CD for 5%. And if we're thinking about an operating note at 10, then I think on the money you have invested in cows or equipment or just the cash that you're using for operating, you should expect some return on that investment. So with that in mind, let's start talking about annual cow cost. And this is where I'd like you to weigh in. You can come on the chat box and type in. But as we think about annual cow cost, what do you think are the big costs? What are big categories of costs as we think about taking care of a cow for a year? Anybody want to weigh in? All right, we got some already weighing in. Feed. Okay, yeah, winter feed, hay. All right, good. Yeah, for sure, feed. Feed is really a big cost here. And when I say feed, I'm not only talking about harvested feed, but as I think about this, I'm talking about grazed feed as well. So one of the interesting things about Nebraska, in my mind, is that we have some of the most valuable grass of anywhere in the United States. And what I mean by that is that if you look at what it costs to go out and rent grass on a price per pair per month, there's nowhere in the United States that I'm aware of that has a higher cost to graze grass in the summer with a cow-calf pair than we have here in Nebraska. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. But feed and grass in Nebraska is valuable, especially as we look at what hay prices are recently. It's valuable. So when I look at feed, annual cow cost, grazed feed, harvested feed, usually somewhere around 40 to 70% of annual cow cost. If we value that feed at its economic value, it's around 40 to 70%. All right. Some of you weighed in on some other expenses. What would be another big expense? I see someone in here's got equipment. Okay. Yeah, equipment. Equipment would be a big one. Okay. That's a big one. Anybody priced a pickup recently? Okay. It kind of takes your breath away if you think about needing to pay for a pickup with income from cows. along with equipment, I'm going to say labor. Okay. I'm going to put equipment and labor together, and let me explain why. Frequently, labor replaces equipment, or we need equipment to be operated by labor. So I grew up in the Sandhills when I was in junior high school, late 80s, early 90s. There was a lot of hay operations on ranches in the Sandhills where they would hire high school students and college students in the summer to come work in the hayfield. And you'd see hay crews of 6 to 10 people, bar mowers, dump rakes. That was kind of the end of the area of stacking. There was a lot of round bales being put up. Today, if you go out, you hardly ever see any of those kind of hay crews. You see big mowers, you see balers, and you've got 2 people basically doing what, maybe 4 to 8 or 10 people did 30 years ago. Equipment has replaced labor. And so as we think about labor and equipment, that's usually number 2 as we think about cost. Okay. Anybody else want to take a run at what you think number 3 might be as we think about annual cow costs?
Someone add taxes in there.
Yeah, taxes. Okay. Taxes. So taxes often come up, and I'm going to say that taxes is a little different category. So probably I'm guessing you were thinking about land taxes. And as I think about economically, we're going to separate the land enterprise from the cow enterprise, meaning I realize that taxes are an expense if I own land, but if I own cows, I don't have to own land. Now, my cows, if they're paying fair market value for the grass, I'm going to use that income from the cows grazing the grass to pay taxes on my land enterprise. But if I own land, I don't have to own cows. So that land tax is actually tied to the land enterprise and is not a direct cow enterprise, or not a direct expense to the cow enterprise. Now, I also realize if you own land and your own cows, and indirectly your cows are paying the taxes, but from a cow enterprise standpoint, economically, probably not taxes. Okay. Anybody else? I see somebody put in fuel. I would tie that to our equipment expense.
I think someone further up there said depreciation at 1.2.
Yeah, depreciation. So as you mentioned depreciation, I don't know if you were thinking depreciation on equipment, or maybe you were thinking about depreciation or replacement cost on a cow. All right. And that is number 3. And we're going to talk about that one a little bit more.
Yeah, they said on cows.
Okay, on cows. Okay, good. Cow depreciation. Yeah, this is a big one. And we don't talk about it very much. At least I don't see it talked about very much in the popular press. Now, I'd say over the last 5-6 years, I see this talked about more, but cow depreciation or replacement cost, that is a big one. And there's some other ones, bull cost, some things like that. Those are bigger ones, but those are the big 3 when I look at annual cow cost. Okay. Those are the big 3. All right. Somebody else put health and vet in. That's a significant expense. So these are the big 3. We might put bull expenses in as well. And then that vet health, that's sure an expense. But let's just talk about these costs a little bit. And I want to talk about this tonight in terms of unit cost of production. So if we think about unit cost production, and we're thinking about this, we're thinking about costs being in the numerator, units produced being in the denominator. And we think about cows, what are we producing? Well, what we're producing is pounds of weaned calf. So we have our costs in the numerator, units produced in the denominator being pounds of weaned calf. We're thinking about what does it cost us to produce a pound of weaned calf? If we go to sell calves, how do we get paid? Well, we get paid by the pound. And so we're going to think about this relationship tonight and talk about this quite a bit because it's pretty significant as we think about cow costs. Also, if we think about cost and the relationship with production, if I spend money up here, I'm hoping I get production down here that's greater than that cost. But let's talk about the cost in the numerator. And I like to break it down into 2 costs. I like to break it down into overhead costs. Some folks like to call this fixed cost, and I'll explain later. Fixed cost is not my preference, but overhead cost. And then another cost we have is what I would call direct cost. Okay. And if you've been in economics before, sometimes you hear this called variable costs. Okay. But for tonight, we're going to talk about direct costs and we're going to talk about overhead costs. Okay. So let's just talk these through a little bit. And I'm going to tell a brief story just to illustrate this. So let's say I've got a 200 cow ranch and my neighbor comes to me and says, hey, Aaron, I'd like to retire. I don't have anybody wanting to come back and take over the ranch. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to lease you my ranch and sell you my cows. I've got a 200 cow place. You've got a 200 cow place. I know you'd like to grow your ranch. I'll lease you the ranch and I'll sell you my cows. So I go to my bank and they are willing to do that. They're willing to finance me to lease the ranch and buy his cows. I've got 200 cows. My neighbor's got 200 cows. We're now going to run these two ranches as one unit. We put each other on quite a few fences, and so it's not hard to do that. The day I go buy my neighbor's cows and I combine his cows with mine and I start running these two ranches as one ranch, when I buy his cows, do you think I'm going to need to go buy more equipment or need to go buy more four-wheeler, a tractor, because I've added those 200 cows? Anybody, again, type in chat box. What do you think? Do I need more equipment because I've added 200 cows? I've got some people having quizzical looks. Okay.
You may not need more. You may not need more equipment, but your costs come down because you're running more cows.
Okay. All right. So somebody came on and said, hey, you may not need more equipment, but your costs come down when you run more cows. And the answer to that is yeah. If I don't add more equipment, if I don't add more labor, I had 200 cows before and I was taking care of those 200 cows with my labor and equipment. If I have the same tractor, four-wheeler, bale processor, livestock trailer, if I don't really add any more equipment and labor, now I might need some more day labor. Maybe I need some more help at branding, at pregnancy testing, maybe, doing some of those kind of, I'd say, project type things throughout the year. But day to day, if I can take care of those 400 cows, I'm now spreading my labor and my equipment over 400 cows instead of 200 cows. Well, the day I added those 200 cows, my overhead costs basically were cut in half on a per cow unit. Okay. If we think about that, then as we think about direct costs, the day I buy those 200 cows, am I going to need to buy more vaccine? Yeah, right. Am I going to need to buy more ear tags, more salt mineral, more protein supplement? The answer is yes. For every cow I add, there's going to be direct costs that are going to increase. Those costs are direct costs. So I am going to spend more money on ear tags. I am going to spend more money on vaccine for the herd as a whole by adding those additional 200 cows. That helps me think about this cow cost thing quite a bit, because there are some costs like overhead costs that they don't change very much in terms of total dollars spent. Now, I'm not saying I can't reduce overhead costs through management, but I need to also recognize that oftentimes there's economies of scale that come with overhead costs. And if I can run more cow units with the same labor and the same equipment, it's going to reduce my overhead cost per unit. So let me see if I can illustrate this graphically. I'm going to grab another flip chart, be right back with you. All right. So this is kind of illustrating graphically what I was talking about. So I want you to pretend with me. You can see down here on the bottom, I've got 0 cows, and then I've got 100, 200, 300, 400 cows, okay, 500 cows all the way out here, like I was talking about earlier in terms of adding more cows to the ranch. All right, so if I think about here, I think about this green line, that's revenue or product produced. So as we think about that, if I've only got 1 cow, I've got some revenue, but if I have equipment to take care of cows, you can see that that doesn't even cover my overhead costs, right? My red line here is overhead. That's things like a pickup, tractor, four-wheeler, horses, the chute, alley. Those are overhead costs. Now, as I add cows in production, this blue line here represents direct costs. As I increase the number of cows I have in production, I'm going to spend more money on things like vaccine, ear tags, and that as we add more cows, we're going to increase our total cost. But my overhead costs don't change very much. Now, as I increase the number of cows I have in production, and eventually I'm going to cover my overheads, and then I cover my direct costs. Up here where the green line and the blue line meet, that's what we talk about as being a break even. I'm covering my cost. I'm not really making money. I'm covering my costs, direct costs and overhead costs. Out here, this area, that's where profit occurs. Okay. This is where we want to be. Well, how can we increase profitability? Well, as we look at this, we can find ways to increase the slope of this line, increase productivity, or we got to think about ways to reduce cost, right? So if I can find ways to reduce my labor expense, reduce my equipment expense, if I can find direct costs that are less expensive, that can reduce my cost of production. So we want to find ways to increase this gap out here to increase our profitability. Okay. So as we think about that, okay, there's 5 ways that we can reduce our unit cost production. Okay, there's 5 ways to do this. So remember this, we've got costs in the numerator, units produced to the denominator. So what do you think are ways that we can reduce cost of production? So again, just come on chat box here if you'd like, or you can come on mic, give me some ideas. There's 5 ways we can reduce unit cost production. Anybody have any ideas? Okay, so somebody said wean heavier calves. All right, let's talk about that one. All right, wean heavier calves. So you're talking about the denominator side. If I could find a way to wean heavier calves, so I'm going to increase production, production being here in the denominator. If I can increase production and I can keep costs the same, if I can hold costs the same and increase production, what's going to happen to my unit cost production? It's going to go down, right? Because I'm producing more pounds at the same cost. If I have more pounds produced at the same cost, my cost per pound of calf produced went down. Okay. All right. So another person said lower cost. Okay. So if I can find a way to reduce my costs in the numerator and keep production the same, what happens there? I reduced my cost, held production the same. My cost of production goes down. Okay. All right. Let me look here in the chat a little bit. All right, so somebody said if I could increase volume to reduce my fixed cost, all right? Yep, that's another, it would be an example here. I'm reducing my fixed cost per cow unit or overhead cost. If I can keep production the same, that's going to reduce my unit cost production. All right, another one, this is a home run here. If you can figure out how to do this, this is where you want to do a lot of this. If I can figure out a way to reduce my costs and increase production, that's a home run there, right? And how do I do more of that? How can I reduce my costs and increase production? So I'll just pick one here. Let's say I've been calving in January, February. And for those of you who were doing that last year, I know that was a tough go, right? That was a tough time. So maybe I decide, you know what? Feed's expensive. I've been calving in January, February. I don't know that that works anymore. I'm going to move my calving date after last year. So now maybe I move to April, May. I'm going to reduce my feed cost and hopefully have more calves weaned because maybe I wasn't losing many to weather stress, scours, things like that. So I reduce my cost and I increase production. Okay. All right. We got 2 more, and these are not as intuitive, but I'll just pick on the first one. Let's talk about the first one. If you open any trade magazine, you're going to see advertisements for products to use on your operation. I'm going to pick on one. Let's just pick on implants. So if I see an ad for an implant, what is the promise that's going to happen? Or I shouldn't say, what do they tell me should happen if I buy an implant and I put it in my steer's ear? What do they expect is going to happen? What do they tell me will happen? I'm going to wean a heavier calf, right? I'm going to wean a heavier calf. So they're going to grow more quickly. I'm going to have more pounds to wean. I'm going to have more pounds to sell. So what they're saying is, buy our product, buy our implant, spend some money here, up here in the numerator side, right? Spend some money in the numerator side. So we want you to increase your costs. And then what are they promising? Increased production. So the promise is You spend $4 or $5 on our implant, you're going to have 15 more pounds, 20 more pounds of calf to sell. You're going to have increased production. So I'm spending some money to increase production. My hope is that I'm spending money in a way that's going to produce more value than the cost of the implant. Does that make sense? So I spent money. I'm going to drastically or hopefully get a bigger increase in the value of production than the cost. All right, now there's one more, and this is one we don't talk about very much. And it's one that I think there's probably quite a bit of opportunity to consider, especially in light of what we're seeing happen with input costs, labor, equipment, interest rates, fuel. All of those things have increased significantly. Harvested feed costs, salt and mineral. Now, as I say this, I want to be careful here, but we want to think about what happens if I reduce my inputs. Now, could it be that I could drastically cut costs? So I'm going to really take an axe to some costs and decrease production. Whoa, don't do that. Don't decrease production. But what if I drastically cut costs and it reduces production, but I cut costs much faster than what I reduce production? If I do that, what's going to happen? Will my cost of production go down? It will. Now, am I going to have less pounds of calf to sell? I will. But may I be more profitable because I've significantly reduced my costs and I still have something to sell, but my costs are much less. And the product I have is maybe less product to sell, but I've cut my cost of production. Okay, those are the 5 ways to address unit cost production. So as you think about that, think about your own operation, thinking about fixed cost, overhead cost, thinking about how might I address this with my own operation, thinking about these 5 ways to reduce cost production. So I want to talk about that example a little bit more of looking at direct cost as we thought about our implant and looking at that as a strategy. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears here a little bit and use a irrigated hay or grass pivot as my example, just because it's a little nicer to graph out. So let's say I've got an irrigated grass pivot and I might hay it or I might graze it, but I've decided for 2024, I'm not going to turn the pivot on and I'm not going to put out any fertilizer. Okay. Not going to irrigate it, not going to put out any fertilizer. We're just going to see what happens, see what grows. Will I grow some grass? Yes, I'll grow some grass. I'm going to grow some level of grass here. Okay. So up here on the left side, this is grass production. So let's say I don't turn the pivot on at all. No water, no fertilizer. I'm going to grow some grass. Okay. Now let's say I decide to put on 50 units of nitrogen, I made 20 of phosphorus, and I'm going to put on 4 or 5 inches of water. Am I going to get a response to that? Yeah, I should, right? I'm going to see a response to that, and probably a pretty rapid response. All right. Maybe now I say, you know what if I put on 100 pounds of nitrogen and 40 pounds of phos, and I'm going to put on 10 inches of water? Probably still going to see a response. Do you think I'm going to see the same level of response as I did with my initial fertilizer and water? Probably not. I'm going to start to see this curve slow down a little bit. Now, let's say I get out to 150 pounds of N, and I'm going to put on 12 inches of water. Still going to get some response, but again, this curve is starting to slow down. See how we're not seeing that sharp increase anymore. Now I'm out to 200 pounds of nitrogen and maybe 15 or 20 inches of water. Not probably starting to see any response. If I keep increasing that, we're actually going to get to a place where additional water and fertilizer actually has a negative effect on growing forage. Now, most of us are never going to get there. We're not going to do that. Economically, there's a point out here to the left where the cost of the water and the fertilizer and the response I get in grass growth are equal to one another. Meaning, if I look at the value of grass growth and I look at the cost of the water and the fertilizer, there's some place out here, probably somewhere in this area, where the cost of water and fertilizer is equal to the value of grass. Well, do I want to put on more water and fertilizer past the value of equal to the value of the grass? No, I don't. In fact, I want to be back from that someplace, right? Because if I go past there, I'm not getting any response to my my fertilizer and water. So this is what we call in economics the point of diminishing returns, okay? So as I put in inputs of water and fertilizer, I was getting a rapid return early on. As I added additional inputs of water and fertilizer, there came a point where I no longer got any response. So this is what we talk about as in diminishing returns. Okay, diminishing returns. And I would submit to you that I think for many cow-calf operations, they've maximized production on their operation. And there's some good data to support this. Some data from commercial cow herds, Texas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, Minnesota, basically over the last 20 years have not shown much increase in terms of reproductive rates in cows, in terms of number of calves weaned, or in pounds of average pound of calf weaned. Some good CHAPS data out of North Dakota. Would encourage you to go check that out if you'd like. Basically, over the last 20 years, really haven't shown much in terms of increased production. That tells me, I think in many cases, we've maximized production at the ranch level in terms of what we can wean in terms of calves. Well, we have to think about diminishing returns. If I'm trying to spend more money to get an additional pounds of calf weaned, am I getting as much bang for my buck up here? The answer is no, okay? The answer is no. And so I think we need to think about that as we think about input costs, as we think about, I'd like to get another 3 or 4% of my cows bred. That might be a good idea. But if let's say you're at 90% cows bred and you want to get to 94, and you're thinking, you know what, I need to spend some money to do that. The question becomes, what did it cost you for what you spent to get an additional 4% of your cows bred? Now you might do the math and it's a good deal, but 90% of your cows got bred without that additional input, and you're going to spend money on all the cows to get additional 4% bred. Okay, so just think about that a little bit as we think about this point of diminishing returns and input costs. We have to think about, what am I getting for what I spend? If I spend $1 and I don't get $1.50 back, or I don't get $1.20 back, I want to stop doing that. And sometimes it's hard to recognize where that point is, but that's what we talk about in terms of direct costs. Okay, all right, that point of diminishing returns. All right. So now I want to come back and we talked about one of the major costs for a cow-calf enterprise is cow replacement cost or depreciation. So I'm just going to pick that as one of the cost categories I want to spend a little bit of time on tonight and just kind of walk through an example, because I think this is one where sometimes we don't talk about it very much. And I think there's often opportunity to think about this and make some changes that can improve profitability, reduce our cost production. So as we think about a cow, okay, I'd like you to think about a cow kind of like you think about a pickup or a tractor, okay? If I go out and I buy a pickup and I run that pickup for 10 years and it starts to wear out, I start to have some problems with it, I go back to the dealership and I trade that pickup in, and I'm going to buy a new pickup. When I trade that pickup in, does it have some value? Yeah, the answer is yes, it's got some trade-in value. And then I have to come up with some money from somewhere else, plus the value of that trade-in, to buy my new pickup. So I'd like you to think about that a little bit like we think about a cow, okay? So we're going to go out and we're going to buy a cow. So let's go out and buy a cow. Anybody, just type in the chat box, what's it going to cost us to buy a good quality bred heifer this December, January? So I'm thinking here, February, March calving heifers. These are good ones. Maybe they're AI'd one time, cleaned up. All right, got some people weighing in, 2,700, 2,800. Anybody else want to weigh in? What do you think it's going to cost us to go buy a really nice bred heifer? 28, 26, okay. All right, I'm going to pick 2,700 just to kind of keep the number in the middle there. All right, so to do that, what I first want to do is let's talk about cow depreciation. So if I go out and buy a heifer, I've got my purchase price, that's what PP stands for, or if I'm raising them, we might say it's development cost, okay? I've got my purchase price, development cost minus sales price, okay? Minus sales price. So I'm hoping that if I go buy a bred heifer or I raise her, I get to take her back to the sale barn. Because if I don't, that means she has zero value, right? Those are those cows that die. And in fact, I might say they have negative value, because if I have to hire the rendering plant to pick them up, they obviously charge me now to pick up cows. Okay. So death loss is an expense. We'll talk about that. But purchase price or development cost minus sales price divided by productive years. Okay. Divided by productive years. Okay. This is cow depreciation. All right. So if we think about a pickup, this is not really any different than our cow. We go buy a pickup, we have a trade-in value, or we might say sales price, and then we divide that by the number of years that we use the pickup on the ranch, and we get a depreciation cost per year. It's a similar thing to a cow. So now let's talk about the cow. So if we've got this cow, we're going to go buy her for $2,700. Okay, that's the number we picked. So tell me, what do you think she's going to be worth when we take her back to the sale barn and trade her in? And I'll let you, again, type in the chat box here. Let's pick a number. It's going to be wrong, but let's pick a number. So I'm going to weigh her up at some point in her productive life. Hopefully I get a lot of years out of her. What's she going to be? All right, Robert weighed in at 1,300. Do I have anybody else in? That's about what weigh cows are, somewhere around $1 today. Anybody else weigh in? What do you think? All right, Robert, you had the winning bid at 1,300, so we'll just use that number, okay? So $2,700 when I buy the cow, $1,300 when I trade her in. All right, well, let's do the math here. 7 minus 3 is 4. 2 minus 1, $1,400. So I bought her for 27, and I take her back to the sale barn and get 1,300 for her. So there's $1,400 of depreciation there, right? Now, how many years do you think I can get on average out of this cow? How many calves is she going to wean for me? So I buy her as a 2-year-old. She's going to calve as a 2. How many calves do you think I might get? Again, I'll just let you weigh in on chat. Let's have a conversation. We got somebody to vote 6. I got to vote for 5. Anybody else want to weigh in? Got to vote for 5. Okay. All right. So that somewhere in that 4.5 to 5, I think, is pretty typical for a Northern Great Plains kind of cow. Okay. So tonight, we'll just use a 5 to make the numbers round. When I look at most folks, if you're in a 17 to 20% cow replacement rate, somewhere in that 4.5 to 5 is kind of where we would look at in terms of cows that wean calves. Okay. So let's divide 1,400 by 5. Okay. Well, do that. Let me do the math here real quick. All right. 1,400 divided by 5. That's $280 in cow depreciation per calf produced. $280. Okay. Oh, but wait, did every cow get back to the sale barn? What do you think? Oh, they didn't, right? So let's pick an average cow value. If I said 1,800, would that cause anybody too much heartburn? So the average value of that cow over her life, if we said she was worth $1,800, does that seem reasonable? All right, we'll just use it. Okay. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. All right. So let's say she's got an average value of $1,800 over her life. Do you think a 2% death loss is reasonable per year on a cow herd? So I got 100 cows, one gets struck by lightning, one gets sick and dies. Is a 2% death loss reasonable? I think it is. Okay, I think that is. So if we think about 2% on 1,800, that's $36. Okay, so we've got 280 in depreciation, and then we got those cows that are fully depreciated, meaning they're worth 0. We don't get anything back from them, right? We got to take that into account. So let's add that $36 to our 280 over here. Now all of a sudden we've got cow cost of cow depreciation and death loss is about $316 per calf. Okay. Ooh, that's a big expense. So what are some things we could do to try to address this? And again, I'll let you come in on the chat. Give me some ideas. How can we try to address this depreciation and cost as we think about annual cow costs? I'll give you a hint. There's 3 ways to do it. Okay, so somebody weighed in almost $1 a day. Okay, yeah, and if you want to think about that from a calf weaning weight standpoint, so first, does every cow wean a calf? Okay, so and the answer is no. So one of the things that Shannon weighed in and said, well, could we get more calves? And the answer is yeah, right? If we could get a 6th calf rather than 5, if we could figure out a way to increase productive years, we would reduce our costs per calf produced, right? All right, yep. So I want to jump on this one just a little bit. So if you go to a bull sale or you open a trade magazine, we talk about this one quite a bit. We talk about cow longevity. We talk about cow fertility. We'll see EPDs on that. Angus, Red Angus, Simmental, they all have fertility EPDs. They have heifer pregnancy EPDs. There's a sense and there's a drive genetically. How do we get more calves? And so I think that could be a good tool. Another example of how to do that is using something like hybrid vigor. Crossbred cows tend to wean more calves and stay in the herd longer than straightbred cows do. And there's a lot of data that would support that. So if I can figure out a way to increase the number of years my cow is productive, keep her in the herd longer, that's sure an option, okay? I was visiting with someone today. They have a fall calving herd. They had a number of open cows. They say, we're going to roll our spring cows to our fall herd. There's a little bit of expense to carry them, but we're going to try to get more calves. That's another way to do that. All right, so Hazy said, can we figure out a way to get more value when they leave the herd, okay? And she's right. Can I figure out a way to increase the value of cows when they leave the herd? So maybe I get more value for them as selling as a cull cow, or could I maybe do something to add value instead of selling them as a open cow? Could I sell them as a bred cow? All right. Now, for some of us, that's why would you ever sell a bred cow? Well, what if you think about if I'm developing my own heifers, if I can get 2 or 3 calves out of them and sell them when everybody else wants them, did somebody want a $2,800 heifer? Yeah, right, because they spent that money for them. Well, if I can figure out a way to sell cows when they have more value, I can increase the value of the cow when she leaves the herd, and that would reduce my depreciation expense. All right, there's one more. Can I figure out a way to get the cow into the herd at less cost? All right. Can I figure out a way to get a cow into the herd at less cost? So I'm thinking about here, for those of you who are developing your own heifers, looking at development cost. What does it cost me to get a cow into the herd? How can I address that? Can there be something I can do to reduce the cost of that? Or perhaps for some people, it might be buying replacements. So a ranch I work with, they are May-June calvers. He recently made the decision that he's no longer going to develop his own replacement heifers, but he's going to buy other people's later calving cows. Now, some of you might be saying, well, if you're doing that, you're just buying people's less fertile cows. And I think there's a legitimate challenge with that. But for this particular ranch, he was running about 280 cows, keeping about 45, 50 heifers over, exposing them to breed, getting somewhere around 35 or so, 30, 35 to bring in each year. Well, he's going to run more cows. He's going to run about 300, 310 cows, and he's going to buy replacements. Well, oftentimes he has a relationship with another ranch where they've got February, March calving cows, move into mid to late April. He's going to buy their late April, May, and actually some of their June calving cows. And he's got a relationship, and he's going to actually buy those for much less than it would cost him to develop a replacement heifer on his ranch. So he's getting cows into the herd for less cost. Okay. So for your own operation, thinking about how can I address this issue of cow depreciation? How can I get a cow into the herd at less cost? How can I increase the value of that cow when she leaves the herd? Or can I find a way to get more productive years? All right. Any questions on that? All right, questions on that one? Okay, so let's talk about another one. It's bull sale season's just around the corner here. Some people have had their bull sales, 18-month-old bulls here this fall, seen some sale results already. So let's go buy a bull. All right, this is where you get to participate again. Let's go buy a bull, and I want you to tell me what we're going to need to spend to go buy a good bull this year. We're not going to buy the sale topper, but we're not going to buy the bottom end. We're going to buy kind of a middle of the sale type bull. So weigh in here. What do you think we need to spend for a bull? All right, I got some at 5,000. I got a couple at 75. I got one at 45, 5 to 6. So I'm going to kind of 8,500. Okay. All right. So there's some high dollar bulls out here. All right. I'm just going to pick a number. And again, I'm going to kind of pick in the middle of what you guys sent to me. So let's just pick $6,500. We're going to go buy a bull. We're going to spend $6,500 on it. Okay. All right. $6,500 for a bull. All right. So I buy my bull. He's $6,500. All right. Am I hoping I'm going to get to trade that bull in? Am I hoping I get to take him back to the sale barn and weigh him up? Yeah. Right. So what's he going to be worth as a pound or a weigh-up bull? All right. Tell me, I guess, kind of weigh in. So let's say he weighs 1,800 pounds or so when I weigh him up. We'll just keep the numbers round. Let's say I get $2,000 out of him. Okay. 2,500. We'll go there. 2,500. So I'm going to get $2,500 for him as a weigh-up. All right. So I buy him for 65. I sell him for 25. So I've got $4,000 here in depreciation. Okay, 4,000 bucks. Now, how many cows do you think I'm going to expose him to? How many years do you think I can get out of my bull? So let's just talk about, okay, somebody weighed in 4, going to get 4 years out of him. Okay. Hope to. Had someone else say 3. Okay. Anybody else got a vote? So if you hope to get 4 years out of a bull, does everybody get 4 years out of a bull? Oftentimes they have some fall out, right? If I say I'm going to sell a bull at the age of 4 or 5, I didn't get 4 years out of all my bulls, but we'll just use 4 tonight as an example. Okay. We'll use 4. Somebody said they're every 2 years. Okay. Maybe let's back that down to 3. Okay. So let's just say on average, I get 3. Some bulls make it to 4, but I don't know what it is about bulls, but my experience, and I grew up on a seed stock operation, bulls have a much higher fallout than cows do. They're going to get injured. They're going to, that's just the nature of having bulls. Okay. So let's just say we get 3 years out of him. Okay. We're going to use 3 tonight. So I get 3 years out of him. How many cows am I going to expose to my bull every year? Again, you can weigh in here and chat. How many cows am I going to expose him to? What do you think? So I had somebody weigh in at 30. Okay, 25. All right, so let's say as a yearling bull, we put him out with 25, and then maybe the next 2 years we put him out with 30. Okay, so if we expose him, that would be 85 cows, right? So we got 85 cows we're going to expose him to. What am I going to get for a pregnancy rate? What do you think? 90%? 92? What do you think? 85, 90. All right, let's just put 90 in. So I expose him to 85 cows and I get 90% bred. That means I roughly got 77 cows that are going to have calves from this bull. I'm going to get 77 calves. All right, so what's our cost and depreciation on our bull? Well, if we take 4,000 and we divide it by 77, okay, that's roughly 52 bucks in depreciation. Oh, wait, but does every bull get back to the sale barn? Oh, nuts, right? Some of these bulls are going to die. Do you think 5% death loss on bull is reasonable? So let's just pick a number. I'm going to say, let's say that bull's worth, I don't know. I'll just pick a number. Let's say over his life, he's worth 3,500 bucks. And let's say that 5% of our bulls die. So let's take that times 5%, 0.05. 3,500 bucks times 0.05. Okay. That's $175 per year in death loss. If we divide that by so we're going to have that bull, we said 3 years. So we're going to take $175 a year in death loss. We're going to take it times 3, right? Because we used him over 3 years. Okay. So 175 times 3 is $525. That's equal to 525. And we're going to divide that by our 77 calves. So let's get that math. So we're going to add roughly another $7. So that's about $59 in depreciation and death loss. Now, are we going to need to feed this bull over the 3 years we have him? We are, right? So what do you think? What does it cost to carry a bull for a year, feed cost wise? Throw me out some numbers. You can type in the chat. Can I do it for $600? What do you think? If I value my grass, I got Robert weighed in at 800K. Right? Anybody else want to weigh in? $1.50 a day. Okay. Do the math on that. So that's roughly $600. Okay, so let's just say 7. I'm going to throw out $700 to feed the bull for a year. Well, we said 3 years we're going to feed that guy. Okay, so we'll just say 3 years. So 3 years times $700 is $2,100 in feed cost. Are we going to get our bull semen tested every year? Are we going to have any vet expense involved with that? I think we will probably. Now, we might not get him semen checked the first year, but probably the second and third year. Okay, so there's some vet expenses. Let's just say I'm going to throw $100 in for vet expense. Okay, so that's $2,200. $2,200 divided by our 77 calves. That's another basically $28, $29 for feed. 9 plus 9 is 18. So we basically are looking at $88 per calf produced in bull expense on our $6,500 bull. $88 per calf produced on our $6,500 bull. So what are some ways we could address bull cost? And again, type in the chat box, think creatively here. What could we do? So if we go back and we think about our replacement heifer or a bred cow, okay? Remember we had our purchase price minus sales price. In this case, we're going to divide it by calves produced, right? Because we're thinking about our calves, okay? Calves produced. So one of the comments was, well, let's make him last longer, okay? If we're trying to make him last longer, what are we trying to do? Trying to get more calves out of him, right? Get him last longer. So we want to get more calves, okay? I had somebody say, put in a cheaper bull, okay? Well, how can I do that? Buy a less expensive bull. Somebody else said, hey, what if we leased bulls? If I leased bulls, I only have to feed that bull probably during the breeding season, right? So that sure could reduce some of my costs. So maybe I could lease bulls. All right. Somebody said maybe I could buy an expensive bull and sell semen. So if I'm selling semen, what I'm trying to do here is actually increase my sales price, right? Because I'm increasing the value of things that I'm getting from that bull. Somebody else said AI. Okay. AI. Yeah, that sure could be an option. Maybe I'm going to AI some cows and look at that as a way to reduce my cost. All right, let me look out through some of the rest of the chat here. Bull rotation. So Mary weighed in with bull rotation. If I could figure out a way to share bulls, maybe I got a spring and a fall herd, or maybe I know somebody that has bulls that they use early in the breeding season, like May, June, and maybe I'm a later calver. Maybe I calve in July, August. Maybe it's a neighbor. We could develop some kind of relationship where we could figure out a way to get more calves by partnering on some bulls. Okay, there's a number of ways we can think about this, but if I could figure out a way, we got over here, we were looking at basically $88 per calf. If I could figure out a way to reduce that by, I'll just pick a number. What if I could figure out a way to get that down to $58 a calf instead of 88? That's $30 a cow. Well, if I got 300 cows, that's $9,000. That's some real money. So it's thinking creatively. If I could figure out a way to reduce my bull expense in this example by $30 and not negatively impact production. Again, we got to be careful here. And some people will say, well, you buy good bulls because they're going to produce calves that are more productive for you. And I'm not taking away from that. So please don't misunderstand. We didn't talk about what's the value of a bull by increased weaning weight or things like that. But I would also say in many operations, I'm not sure there's much production potential left at the ranch in terms of heavier weaning weights. Now, there may be in some situations, but I would just be careful spending a lot of money on a bull just because you think you're going to get more pounds of calf weaned. I'm not sure in many situations that's going to happen. Okay. So just thinking about our bull cost, again, how can we reduce our cost of our bulls? Same thing back with our cow depreciation. What are some ways I could think about addressing that for my cow herd? Okay. All right. I'm looking at the time. I guess anybody want to type any questions you have over the content we've covered tonight? Anybody have questions on what we've covered? So one other quick one I'm going to cover just here in the next 10 minutes is feed costs. And so, all right, so I had Stephanie weigh in. Back to the diminishing returns. Will choosing not to fertilize your grass have a negative effect on your grass in long term? So I think what I was wanting to point out there, Stephanie, was not that you shouldn't water or fertilize. Okay, I think you sure could have a negative effect. But what I was wanting to point out was, as you think about your inputs, there's some point in time where the value of what your input produces is equal to the value of the cost. And you want to think about where might that point be? And I sure don't want to go past that. In fact, I would argue that I want to back away from that a little bit, because if I'm close to the point where my input cost isn't generating more value than my cost, then I'm very close to falling off the edge in terms of I'm spending money and not getting it back. And so I'm more comfortable backing off and saying, I want to see $1.50 for every dollar I spend, because, or $1.30, I'm less comfortable on spending that dollar. The other thing is, oftentimes there's additional costs in addition to the cost of the input. So did that implant get into the calf's ear for free? The answer is no, right? There was some labor involved with that. Now, we might argue not a lot of labor, but that was somebody else had to be doing that at branding time or something else like that. So we want to think about our inputs. If I'm choosing to use something like protein supplement, again, can get a lot of value from that, but just because I have some doesn't mean more is necessarily better. So that's what I was really thinking about there, is the relationship between my input and the value of what I'm getting in terms of production. Okay. Yeah. Good question, Stephanie. Any other questions? All right. So as I've been looking at quite a few hay samples this fall, it's been amazing to me, the variability, and it is every year in terms of a hay sample. So had a situation the other day when some hay came in, and it was somewhere around 7% crude protein and somewhere around 54 TDN. And that stands for total digestible nutrients. Had some other hay, same kind of same kind of type of hay. It came in somewhere around 60 TDN. I should say, let me fix this here. It came in somewhere around 9% crude protein and about 60 TDN. Okay. Now, if you look at these two hays, this difference in crude protein doesn't seem like very much, but it's significant. Okay. As is this energy value. All right. So the thing is, interestingly, this hay was actually priced less than this hay. So by testing the hay, spending some time testing hay, thinking about what am I getting, you can really use that as a tool to your advantage, because this hay was going to take less supplement to feed, and in this particular instance was less expensive than this other hay. So taking some time to look at your feed inputs, thinking about what do I have on hand. So for those of you who raise your own hay, I'd really encourage you to spend some time now that maybe you've got your hay in the stack yard or you've got it lotted. Go ahead and take some time, if you haven't, get a hay probe. You can get one of those from your local extension office a lot of times. Go out and test your hay. See what you have. If you got some hay that you harvested early, you got some hay that you harvested later on some meadows, or you got first, second, third alfalfa, or maybe you got two cuttings off your summer annual. Maybe you got one, a sorghum Sudan, and a second one. Go ahead and test those separately. Get an idea of what you have in terms of hay quality. And then based on that, you can know better what might I need in terms of something to go with that, or maybe my hay adequately meets what I've got. I tested some hay the other day with a gentleman, and we were talking about what does he need to buy. Well, this hay actually tested better than his hay's tested for a number of years. It was over 10% crude protein, over 60% TDN. And for his cow herd, they really didn't need much else. That was going to be adequate to meet a lot of their needs, except right prior to and after calving. Then they were going to need to provide a little additional energy and protein. But we saved him some money by his testing his hay, because normally he would have planned to feed some additional protein and energy with his hay in the past. This year, he didn't need it. And so it was a money savings for him. So that's a way we can address feed cost, is really by, if we're feeding harvested feed, know what we have, and then matching that with what our cow needs and looking at what's my most economical way to do that. So if you have questions on that, please let me know, or visit with your local beef educator on that. There's some good information that we can help you with or provide resources on as you're evaluating maybe your hay resources or other things you're considering as you think about your cows or weaned calves as you go through the winter. All right, Shannon, I'm looking at the clocks just a little bit before 7. Anybody else have any questions? All right, so one thing I did want to mention tonight is we have 2 unit cost production workshops coming up. We've got one coming up here the week after Thanksgiving. It's on November 28th and 29th, and that's in Valentine. And Ryan Benjamin's hosting that one. It's in Valentine. It's a 2-day workshop. And at that workshop, we basically take a case study ranch and we walk through that ranch in terms of understanding the hay enterprise, the land enterprise, which is the rangeland, the cow-calf enterprise, and replacement heifer development. And we look at all the costs involved. And we talk about the different enterprises, and we look at how they interact with one another. So if this unit cost production is something that you really are interested in and want to go on a deeper dive, would encourage you to consider coming to that. It's a 2-day workshop, $85 at Valentine. And then we also have one out here at Kimball coming up the following week, and that's on December 5th and 6th. And again, that's out here at Kimball. And so you could come call me if you have an interest in that 2-day workshop. You get a notebook with resources, a lot of hands-on activity, things like we talked about tonight. We work through problems together. We have discussion. Talk about how do you value grass? How do you value replacement heifer? How do we think about our cost and relationships? And so we have, it's really a fun time. We try to make this economics as engaging as it can be. And for some of you, I you might be thinking, how can that be fun? But most people that come through, we have a lot of good discussion, and it's something that is challenging, but of value. So if you have questions on that, please let me know.
Okay, we got another quick question or two here. It
Okay.
says, is there a state resource that discusses summer pasture feed value averages based on location, or is that something we should consider testing for?
So I think what you're asking there is, what's the quality of my grass through the summer? And so that can really vary quite a bit from year to year. The Goodmanson Sandhills lab for Sandhills has some pretty good data where they've looked at typical grass quality throughout the grazing season on Sandhills range. So if you're in the Sandhills, I would encourage you to check that out as a resource. If you need to help finding that, let me know. But that's a resource that would help you look at quality in terms of what's happening throughout the year. It's pretty hard to test grass in the summer to just go out and grab it. You can do that, but usually you're going to pick something that's not as good a quality as what a cow can, because she knows how to go pick the best. And so usually when we look at people grab sampling some grass and then comparing it to esophageal fistulated cows, where we're actually collecting what the cow ate, usually the cow is always better in terms of protein and energy. Okay.
They know what they like.
and they know what's better. Okay. Yep. All right. All right. Any other questions?
I think that's it. That's all I see. So.
All right. I would just add, if you have any questions on what we talked about tonight and you'd like to visit in person, shoot me an email, give me a phone call. I would be happy to visit more about the content we discussed.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. A recording of the webinar will be posted at cap.unl.edu after this tomorrow. So, and you can also register for other upcoming webinars. We would also really appreciate your feedback on the brief evaluation that should pop up as you close Zoom, or else you'll receive it tomorrow. That helps tell us how today went and inform us of future webinars. Thanks again for joining us. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.